Hey everybody, this is Daniel Patrick, and this is episode number 190. Mandolins and Beer podcast brought to you in part by my favorite website, the Mandolin Cafe. How's everybody doing? It's also brought to you by Acoustic Disc, David Grisman's website with all his incredible music and all the music he's kind of accumulated over the years with some incredible players. It's also home of the Acoustic Encounters podcast, which is Danny Barnes and David Grisman. We actually talk about Danny Barnes for a minute here in this episode with Jake Eddy. Also, huge welcome to Stringjoy as a sponsor of the podcast. I'm so excited to have them. I was excited. I saw on the Mandolin Cafe, my favorite website, the other morning that Stringjoy was making mandolin strings, and I had just actually gotten a text from a friend of mine, a guitar player who I really, really respect. And he had asked me, hey, have you ever checked out these Stringjoy strings? And I had not, because they hadn't made mandolin strings yet. He's like, he loves them. And then, well, look at that. They come out with mandolin strings, and this is exciting. I love trying out new strings and picks, so I'm super excited to check out these Stringjoys. They have phosphor. They have coated phosphor, which should be very interesting because I know a lot of people have been really bummed by a couple companies who no longer make their favorite coated strings. And they have 80/20 as well. They have different gauges. And great news, you can get 10% off your order from Stringjoy by using the promo code MandolinBeer, all one word, at checkout. That's right. Just go to stringjoy.com, buy all the strings, get all 3 sets, try them out, see which one your mandolin loves. And then just at the checkout, enter the promo code MandolinBeer, all one word at checkout. That's it. Get 10% off. Welcome, Stringjoy. Thanks for joining on. I was really excited to do this week's episode. I am a Jake Eddy fan, not only just as a player, but as a person. He is a really, really nice guy. I got to spend some time talking to him and his brother at IBMA last year, and just two great, fun people. And his playing is inspirational. If you're not familiar with Jake, he is just one of the best guitar players out there right now, and his Instagram is just filled with some incredible playing. And his right-hand technique, just all of his technique is great, but I felt that we could learn some stuff from him, especially some of the things that he had been posting about lately, about learning licks and not worrying about scales and learning the chords to songs. Is a really, really good one. We also touch on a subject, and it's kind of I would say a social media no-no. I mean, if you know a person, maybe it might be okay to ask. However, when somebody gets the instrument of their dreams, and it's a vintage instrument, obviously, the cost is expensive. But if you don't know a person, I don't think the first thing you should be asking somebody is how much they paid for it. You know, it's a personal thing, and I don't know. It's like asking somebody that you don't know what they make. So we talk a little bit about that, and then Jake kind of touches on it a little bit too. But it was interesting because I remember when he got that guitar, and I just remember looking at the comments, and it was just so weird to see so many people like, "How much did you pay for that? How much did you pay for that?" You know, it's just listen to him play it. That's what's important. Anyway, let's get into the advertisers real quick here. Peghead Nation. With Peghead Nation's streaming video courses in mandolin, guitar, banjo, fiddle, dobro, ukulele, and bass, you'll learn bluegrass, old-time, and other styles from some of the most talented players and instructors in roots music. PegheadNation.com features a great lineup of mandolin instructors with courses taught by Sharon Gilchrist, Joe K. Walsh, he's got a bunch of them, Mike Compton, John Reichman, Aaron Weinstein, Marla Fibish, Chad Manning. All the courses include high-quality multi-angle video lessons, downloadable notation and tab, play-along tracks, and plenty of tunes and songs to play. The best part is you can join any of Peghead Nation's video courses now and get your first month for free. Just go to PegheadNation.com right now and use that promo code MandolinBeer, all one word, at checkout. Northfield Mandolins, let's build more than a mandolin together. Check out their website at northfieldmandolins.com. Download their app at mandosummit.app for lots of special performance recordings, demonstrations, and special workshops. Also, follow them on social media, man. I just love the joy that Adrian gets from trying to build the perfect instrument, and there's some videos of him just, tweaking, and that's why they remain at the top of the game. So make sure you follow Northfield on Instagram. Ear Trumpet Labs, hand-built microphones in Portland, Oregon. Their mics are beautifully designed. They have great feedback rejection for live use and the most natural tone you'll find for acoustic instruments. Check them out at eartrumpetlabs.com today. Pava Mandolins, dedicated to building for the impassioned player. Pava Mandolins in Austin, Texas. Thank you so much, Pava and Ellis, for being a sponsor. Tone Slabs. Dude, I love my Tone Slab picks. They, the Darth Tone, I love them. And working something special up with my friends over there at Tone Slabs. Their customer service is great, too. And they've got all the thicknesses and shapes that you could possibly want. I highly recommend go to toneslabs.com. Get yourself a slab of tone. I've got a copy coming of the new Lloyd Lore book that Roger Simonoff has just put out. Roger's research on Lloyd Lore, it's over 50 years of information. It covers his entire life from his birth in 1886 to his death in 1943. It's got it all from his beginnings to his work overseas, his work on the Gibson Master Model, the L5, the F5, the H5, the K5, everything all through his career. Musical scores, his involvement with the Versatone producer, his patents. All of this, Roger has researched it. He's done interviews with everyone from Gibson historians to Lloyd's wife and widow, Bertha. So I'm excited to read that. And you can get that, too, if you go to SimonoffBooks.com now. And guess what? Use the promo code MandoBeer. All caps, 2 separate words at checkout. You also get 10% off. Thank you, Roger. I can't wait to read this book. It's going to be really good stuff. And Elderly Instruments. Elderly Instruments is your trusted source for new, used, and vintage fretted and stringed instruments. For the experienced beginner player, their vast selection of mandolins, guitars, banjos, ukuleles, did I mention mandolins? Includes all of the accessories and books to go with them. All instruments are inspected and set up for easy playability, and their down-to-earth and knowledgeable staff are there to help. Now in their 51st year, they're family-owned and operated. They ship worldwide, and you can visit them anytime at elderly.com. All right, let's get into this episode with Jake Eddy. Let's play it in with he put an album out with Dominic Leslie playing mandolin on it. And Jake's got a ton of great stuff. There's links below all the samples that you'll hear on this. There are links to where to go to buy these albums and these tracks and all that great stuff. So be sure to click them, support your favorite artists, and have yourselves a fantastic weekend. Cheers, everybody. Well, it's my pleasure to welcome to the podcast Jake Eddy. Jake, how's it going?
Hey, man, I'm good. Thanks for having me. It's good to be here.
Dude, thank you so much for doing it. We met at IBMA and been kind of talking about doing this for a while now, so I'm glad we finally connected and made it happen.
Yeah, man, it takes time. Busy guys, both of us. So
yeah.
great.
You when did you record? You have that album Live at the Spanish Ballroom that was from 2023. I was listening to that this weekend, which is just so great, man.
Thank you, man. Yeah, I guess I just cut it in, I think the show was either in January or February in Tacoma, Washington.
Wow, no kidding.
And so, yeah, I mean, my thing was like, you know, it's a pretty strong statement to put out a solo flat picking record, I think, on its own. And then the other thing was, you know, that was like a sold out show, like thousands of miles from my home, which I think is also a pretty strong showing. So I think the whole thing was like, you know, I'm glad we captured it, and I'm glad I could put it out, and it turned out, and, you know, so.
You know, what really impressed me about the album, too, is, you know, with just looking at the track listing, and I'm like, oh, wow, this is going to be great. Even though you have the ability to just burn through tunes and sound amazing, those tunes all are just beautifully played. And while there's some really fast stuff on there, it's just the way you play them and approach them each is really impressive because, again, you could have been through each of those songs in 30 seconds and it would have been,
Sure.
over. But I think it's really great that a player that is as good as you and as notoriously fast and well clean picked that you can do, that you actually, you respect each of the tunes for what they are as well, which I was really impressed by that.
Well, thank you, man. And also, it's also tries to, I think I tried to speak a little bit to the, like, there's kind of two sides to that solo playing for me. The first being the playing it safe, like here's me playing perfectly, right? I'll do it at a moderate tempo. I don't want to miss anything. It's a nice arrangement. And from top to bottom, it's like flawless, clean. And then the other side is the more like risk taking. Like let's abandon some of the cleanliness of it for, maybe something interesting musically. So there, I try to incorporate both of those things on there, where I'm playing it really straight and really clean, and then also taking risk for the sake of some energy and stuff. So I think it's important to have both.
Yeah, well, I enjoyed it, man. It's great. Who did the artwork for that? Is that Danny Barnes?
Danny Barnes.
Yeah,
Danny Barnes.
That was great.
Yeah,
I love it.
Danny's the shit, man. He's the coolest. He is funny. Like I didn't know him real well before that. Like we had spoke, here and there about this and that. Like, and I collect some art too. So I had bought some some prints and some things off him. And so I asked him to do the cover. And after that, like, we've kind of became friends. Like we talk pretty often on the phone, and like we've stayed in touch and so yeah, I love Danny, man. He's a really, really good dude and has been super encouraging to me.
Yeah, I've been really listening to his album Stove Up a lot recently.
Oh yeah, it's awesome. So good.
Before we get way too far on the podcast, I want to make sure we talk about a couple things right off the top here. And the first thing is I've been seeing some of the videos of your homestay where you have people actually come to your house and stay for multiple days and work on music with you. So let's talk a little bit about that real quick.
Yeah, I mean, so I always do the Zoom lessons, Skype lesson thing, and I have the Patreon, and that's all cool, and but first, really discerning players, especially players who, it's funny. My homestay students usually fall into two camps. Like, first camp would be hobbyist musician who has the cash and the time to come out and spend time with me and really level up. And then the other half are kind of usually working musicians or like young musicians who want to play professionally, and they like, they scrape together and they make it work, whatever. And we work out, like, I try to get them a discount, or we'll try to find them a sponsor, or like, so there's people that kind of just come out because they have the time and the money and the whatever. And then there's some, younger players who really use it as a way to level up quick and try to, like, they use it as kind of a play towards working professionally. So it's cool. Like I get a really wide array of, I get lawyers and dentists and bus boys and Uber drivers and like whatever, it's not, I get all sorts of folks. It's really cool.
And I love too, it's like, it's not just a music and then that's it. There's campfires and food and rifle shooting.
Yeah, I mean, it's the whole thing. I mean, I cook for them. We, we went fishing and we go, do all this stuff. So it's not just, so you figure if you're here for 4 days, like how much can you really play a day? And I've had some students who only want to play 2-3 hours a day, and that's cool. And I've had some students who we've played for like 14, 15 hours. Like guitar in hand the whole time, order in a pizza for dinner and keep working, So it's kind of dependent on the student, and people have different bandwidths for how much they can really play and like soak in before they turn to mush.
And then the other thing that you've had some videos of, and I didn't know this was going to be a project, but you've been playing some with Victor Furtado, and you guys have just recorded.
Yeah, so Victor is like, again, we've kind of been peripherally aware of each other and stuff for a long time, but, he was kind of in a different band and things, and he was busy, and I was busy doing the sideman stuff, but it's finally just got to the point where we've both had the time and kind of, the ability to get together and stuff. So we got together and we played a show, I don't know, a few weeks ago, and then the rest of that week we spent cutting a record. Victor and me and Carter, my brother.
By the way, your brother Carter, I just started following him on Instagram the other day, and I mean, I realized what a great bass player he was playing in a bluegrass setting, but man, he's a killer jazz bass player.
Yeah, he's a monster, and he does a lot of like, bass players work in kind of a different capacity. Whereas like, I mean, I do the hired gun thing some, and I do the session work or whatever. But bass players can like, there might be a week where Carter has 8 gigs with 8 bands. Like it's very like the bass players who really work a lot can play a lot of different styles and stuff. So he'll have like some fine dining restaurant jazz gig on Monday and a bluegrass festival Tuesday and teach workshop on Wednesday and a session Thursday. And, it's like it's all over the place, which is kind of different than the way, guitar players work, I think.
Where do you guys live? Do you guys live in the same city?
Yeah. Matter of fact, we live on the same street.
Oh, do you really?
Yeah. I can see his house from where I'm sitting right now.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah. Yeah, we live in West Virginia. We stayed, we kind of stayed in our hometown, which, I don't know. I mean, I've talked about that quite a bit on different stuff, so I'll bore you the whole story. But just, I always thought that I would move to Nashville and play on the Opry, or I would move to L.A. and do sessions or whatever. And I thought you had to move there to do that. And then I found myself having done all my goals from home. Like I've done the Opry 4 or 5 times, and I go to LA and New York for sessions, and I tour what will be internationally in the fall. And so, it's kind of like, I used to think you had to live somewhere else. I guess my thing about going to Nashville is I love working down there, and I love going down to do the bigger things I like to do, the Opry and the Station Inn, and play sessions and whatever. But, I've worked really hard to stop being a local musician, and stop having to work clubs every night and all that. And I think sometimes if you live in Nashville, you have to do that game. And I don't know if I'm into that.
Yeah, and is West Virginia, like when you play, let's say when you were playing like local clubs, because I live in Charleston, South Carolina, and again, what's great about Charleston, South Carolina is I could play, and I did play at one point, I was doing 300 gigs a year, and but I also knew what I was making when I went into the gig before tips were considered in, where when you move to Nashville, it's the complete opposite. You roll in and you're pretty much playing for tips. And
that's specifically the Broadway thing, is like that, which I've never done, and I don't think I ever will.
Yeah, you don't need to.
Like, I think I got lucky to skip some of that stuff, like I kind of got to cut the line a little bit in some ways.
Yeah, but you've also put in the work in a different aspect. I mean, your social media is just impressive. I mean, it's anytime I meet anybody who hasn't, maybe heard of you, or they might not be necessarily like a bluegrass player, but they might be a really good player at something. I'm always like, oh, do you follow this guy? Yeah, I mean, I send it to everybody who plays.
It's funny, like, the social media thing is not anything that I ever have or ever will work very hard at. And I think people will hear me say that and go, like, oh, that's he's bullshit or whatever. But I just started posting on Instagram like a few years ago just to log my practice, just to be like, hey, mom and grandma and whoever, here's what I'm playing today, right? It wasn't anything like, I was already working, not at the level I am now, but I was already doing sessions and I was already playing gigs and whatever. And, I was already making my living playing music, but the social media like really stepped it up to a whole different thing. And it, I mean, just being honest, it completely changed our life, like in every way, financially and otherwise. I mean, it's been really, really good. And I think it's went well because I don't put too much effort in it. Like you see some people's Instagram videos, they look like movies. And that's its own thing, but that's not my deal. I just, mine's a little more, I don't know, it's like a little bit more impromptu, a little bit more homegrown kind of feeling. Like this morning I posted one playing in my garden, and the entirety of the process was walk out to my garden and set my phone up on the rainwater collector thing, and that's it.
That's great.
Like there's nothing else.
Well, I think maybe that's a lot of what people respond to as well. Is it doesn't seem like like some crazy production where it's like, is this even real? Like how many, I mean, yours come off as raw, and just as a person who lives music.
Right, and it's funny because I don't really even identify with the like internet guitar player thing, you know. Um, like, you know, if you ever see me on a video being like, I'm Jake Eddy and this is my top 20 licks to, you know, like, just put me out of my misery. Like, I hate that. That's not my deal. And, you know, and I've worked hard to like distance myself from that whole crowd and that whole attitude about it.
How did you start playing music?
Man, I was one of these like little bluegrass festival kids, you know, like my parents or my mom and my grandpa were pickers and stuff. And just, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, I was just around festivals and around, you know, jams always at the house and on holidays and every weekend, you know, you go to these, like, at least in West Virginia, you can go to like churches and community centers and old schoolhouses and stuff like that. And they have these jams. You know, so I was kind of on that scene, and it just seemed like the cool thing to do. You know, all my favorite people were like pickers.
And it sounds like your grandpa was one of your heroes.
Totally. And my best friend and everything. Actually, matter of fact, today would have been his birthday.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, we played. So like, I've told this story like a million times, but different audience. When I was a kid, when I was 14, I got hired to play with Melvin Goins playing banjo. And, you know, the short version of the story is my parents said, yeah, you can take the gig if you have an adult with you at all times, right? Because they're hip to what can go on. And so I asked my grandpa if he would be my chaperone on tour. And so he did. And he actually got offered to join the band playing bass. So we toured together in that band for 2 years. It was special. I mean, it really was. It was a good time.
And like when you go on tour, at that age, like was it regional tours? I mean, how far like away from home did you get?
So Melvin was kind of like, you know, one of the last like living pioneer kind of guy. You know, he's in the Lonesome Pine Fiddlers and all that. So, I mean, when I was in the band when I was like 14, he was like 80 something for sure. So yeah, most of the touring was like from. Yeah, I mean, Georgia, Tennessee, North Carolina, Kentucky, Ohio, West Virginia, Indiana, you know, that deal. The kind of, you know, the old school bluegrass circuit, like Bean Blossom and Hyden, Kentucky, and the Tennessee Fall Homecoming and the Mountaineer Opry and the whatever. Like all that stuff is where we were kind of playing.
And then how did you get from, you know, going to festivals and picking with your grandma and your mom and your grandpa and to at 14 being asked to join, you know, a touring band? I mean, that's a pretty big leap at a young age.
Yeah, man. I mean, well, I was kind of like, I don't know. I hate the term, and I don't agree with it. But I was like, you know, people called me like a prodigy or whatever. You know, I was like a little, like just some little nerd, you know, little banjo playing kid. So I had a little recognition that, you know, in that way. So, you know, kind of online and stuff. I remember when I was a kid, there was like an article somewhere, maybe in print or online, that called me a child prodigy. And I think my parents maybe saw that and were like, what the heck? You know, like one of those things. Where,
Sure.
But yeah, so it was kind of that deal. And the way it happened was I used to go to this festival called the MAC in Columbus, Ohio. It used to be Frontier Ranch, and it doesn't exist anymore. But, you know, it was like all the major bands were there. And my grandparents were kind of friends with James King. And so there was this guy, Chris Hill, who played banjo in James King's band. I don't know if you know Chris at all. And he kind of took a liking to me when I was young, and we kind of, you know, would hang out. Like at festivals, he would always like invite me to these jams like in the artist area. So I would get to go and pick with like him and, you know, like Michael Cleveland and like just whoever was picking there at the time. And so he would remember that I was a good banjo player or whatever. So Melvin had called him and asked for if he knew any banjo players looking for a job. And he threw my name in the ring, which is so bluegrass because like no 14-year-old is really looking for a job, but that, you know, that's the way that kind of the way it goes. And I remember it like plain as day. I was at a roller skating rink for a birthday party. So like actually like doing kid stuff. And I got a call on my little flip phone or whatever that said, it was Chris Hill. And he said, son, if Melvin Goins calls you, say yes. And I'm like, man, I'm a kid, but I'll try. You know, 'cause and so I did. And that's kind of how it went to go. And he called me and he said, boy, how'd you like to come play the banjo with me? And I was like, well, I'd like to, but you know, I don't know. I have to go to school and have to. But whatever, it all worked out. My folks kind of let it happen, and it was great. It was, you know, still some of the best times I can remember growing up. It was really great.
Oh man, I bet. I mean, what's it like for a 14-year-old on the road, especially when you say like, Melvin's probably 80 at that point. I mean, what kind of stuff were you? I mean, did you just woodshed? Did you get to, get out and see things? And I mean, you're out there with your grandpa too, who I'm sure is like, let's do something. But
Yeah, I mean, it was, man. The thing that I remember the most is that I grew up like instantly. You know, I remember being a kid when I left, and an adult when I came back. Um, because of not only the thing of working and making money and whatever, but also it was like lawless. You know, my grandpa was like a cool guy. He wasn't like being my dad on the road. He was letting me have fun and letting me really experience it, you know? And so it was cool. I mean, I saw some very wild things. I will tell you that. But yeah, it was just a lot of practicing. Not even practicing, like just, you know, all the Melvin stuff was stuff that like I grew up hearing. So you show up, you're just expected to kind of know it. It's not really, you know, I don't ever remember having a single practice or anything. Just show up and go. And that might not be completely accurate, but I don't remember doing that at all.
so then when did you make the switch from banjo over to guitar?
Well, yeah, so I played both all the while. But my grandpa was also a guitar player and a banjo player. So whatever he was preferring to play at the time, I usually played the other, like at home and stuff. Um, so a lot of times growing up, he liked playing guitar, so I would play banjo and just practice my guitar in my own time, you know. But yeah, I mean, I still play both, especially on sessions and stuff. I mean, I play a lot of banjo on recordings and things like that.
Yeah, you're also a killer telly player.
Man, I've been doing a lot of that lately too. It's funny. It's not something that I put a ton of time in, but it's like if you're a picker, you know, those gigs pop up, and they need somebody who can cut solos and stuff like that.
To hear you going on the road at the ripe old age of 14, I mean, obviously you put in plenty of time to the instrument. Even, no matter how gifted people were like, oh, you're a prodigy, but obviously you worked to get there. When you were woodshedding, what were you doing to help?
Well, yeah, and that's the thing, you know, it's probably some sort of like something in my brain that's broke because I still practice the way I practiced when I was like 8. You know, I still wake up and get the guitar out and lock down somewhere and play for a long time. You know, that's still kind of my thing. And then, you know, there's days like, I mean, I'm an adult, so there's other things I have to tend to. I mean, obviously I'm playing full time, but like, you know, I have a wife and we got to sometimes go grocery shopping or sometimes we got to go to a dinner or whatever. But like, you know, the majority of my time is spent playing, I feel like. And it's been that way for, 15 years or something.
When you grab that guitar, do you have a set thing you do in the morning? Do you have a set practice routine, or you just start?
Nope.
Yeah, wow.
Just start playing, and that's when you'll see some of my posts on there where it says like, "Here's my first notes of the day," and like that's honest. That's not just a caption. I just hit the button and see what's there, what's working, and what's not. At a certain point, I think when you play professionally and when you play a lot like that, it's more. I don't want to say I'm not learning new stuff because I am, but it's also there's some maintenance involved where it's like, hey, I like the way I sound right now. How can I lean into that and make sure everything stays tight and everything's working, as opposed to just, like when you're in the kind of beginning stages of playing, I always tell people learn a bunch of tunes and learn a bunch of solos and whatever. But, once you develop your vocabulary, it becomes more about stretching the stuff you already have and kind of leaning into your strong stuff, at least for me.
You had a really good post on your Instagram recently about vocabulary, which I thought was incredible, and I'd love you to maybe talk a little bit about it. And it was, when soloing, it was like you're not relying on scales, though you might have put a bunch of time into scales. That's not what you're thinking about. You're relying more on vocabulary, which I think is really cool. So I thought maybe we could kind of talk about that.
Yeah, the thing with the vocabulary, I always tell people I don't know any scales, right? And that's true, in some way. If you said to me, play a G major scale, I can do that. Beyond that, I don't really have it.
Yeah.
And it's not, and people say, well, you play all this complicated stuff and it's built from from scales. And it's like, I mean, yes, but everything is built from scales if you think about it that way. Like I've always kind of considered scales, or they're kind of like, it's kind of like the alphabet. Like you can know the alphabet, but if you can't arrange it into some kind of word or a sentence or a joke or whatever, then it's pretty well useless. And so I don't know. I mean, I always advocate for like learning tunes, learn stuff from players you like, and you'll be better off. Because I don't, I just don't know. I'm not from that world. Like that's not how I was raised up playing. So I'm not. I'm sure there's successful players out there that know a lot of scales, especially in like the jazz world, metal world, whatever. But I don't know. You're never going to use scales to come up with something more bluegrassy than a Tony Rice lick or a Clarence White solo or whatever. I mean, you're not going to outdo that stuff.
So you recorded that album or the EP with the Nor'easter album with Andy Statman.
Yeah.
Great album.
Thank you.
And I love Andy Statman. How did that project come about?
Yeah, the thing with Andy was cool. Like I wrote some tunes and I sent him an email. Just said, hey, like, it's kind of stupid. I was like, hey man, I don't know if you know me, but I love your playing and I would really love to have you on this session. And so I hired him basically to play on that session. But it was really different once we actually got together. We went to his place and played some tunes, and it became more of a collaborative thing where we were like, kind of wrote some tunes together and all this. So it was very, it was super organic. And then we just became friends after that. I mean, talking on the phone and playing some shows together. And then we got another record in the works right now for his label. It's going to have some really cool special guests and things. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. Like we just kind of met on that session and became friends. And like I was talking to Carter about this the other day. I don't know what it is. Like it seems like so many players that I admire have ended up like being my buddies. And, I don't know if I'm just a great bullshitter or they like me or what it is, but it's been so cool to like, to make friendships with some of my heroes, and Andy is definitely in that conversation. Like, like right where I'm sitting right now, I'm looking at, I bought my wife some flowers and they're in a vase that Andy Statman's wife made us, so it's very like, it's cool. They're like they're like family. It's really cool.
I watched a live video of you and Statman playing together, and now some of these licks that you have, they're definitely outside the bluegrass realm in a sense of like they're out there. Now how does like something like that come into your vocabulary? Just knowing your background as playing and not being a scale guy, but Statman so out there.
Well, I've transcribed a lot of really wicked stuff, like a lot of jazz and a lot of like. I mean, Andy's put me on to a bunch of this like Greek folk music and like, I mean, gosh, there's so many things. Like some of the things I've been listening to lately that are more outside of the box are like, I really love John Coltrane always and all that post-bop stuff with like McCoy Tyner, and I love Eric Dolphy, and I like listen to Mingus a lot with Carter, and like Andy's put me on to some of the, like this guy Boris Karloff and Pericles Halkias. These are like some Greek clarinetists, and I've been listening to all sorts of Latin music and like I mean, all sorts of stuff. I like stuff that has a similar energy to bluegrass, right? I like the stuff that has a lot of feeling and a lot of really aggressive like timekeeping and stuff like that. So yeah, I mean, just it's from transcribing stuff that I like to listen to, and also I went to jazz school for like a year, and my attendance was very poor, and I quit and stuff. But it was, I'm sure there's some that I've soaked up there. I never learned a lot of like, the most of the theory that I learned there was like, it's weird because I was already playing it at some level, but the stuff I learned there was more like putting a name to concepts I already understood in my own way, but being able to discuss them and like know why they work, and especially the harmonic stuff I learned at school, like knowing how to, like how like reharmonizing tunes and adding different passing chords and implying different chords over changes and stuff like that. I learned from at school. Just knowing like the more on the harmony side of things than the lead playing.
When you're sitting down transcribing these sort of things, do you kind of have like a process you use, an app you use, or anything like that?
I don't really. I mean, sometimes on YouTube I'll slow it down if it's something particularly tough, but I don't. I don't really need to do that a whole lot. It's just, and also when I say transcribe, a lot of people assume I'm writing, and I don't know how to read or write, or tab. I don't know how to read tab or write tab. So it's like, when I say transcribe, really, I guess what I mean is just learning it by ear, like from the record, without any kind of external help, without any kind of written or whatever. So yeah, but no, I mean, not a ton of processing. I just take it like kind of a phrase at a time and just chip away at it. And the chords, I always learn the chords first. Like especially when I'm learning tunes. I kind of have talked about this a bit online, but like the steps for learning a tune, you should be like listen to the tune obviously, and then internalizing the melody. Get to where you can hum it, sing it, and then learn the chords, and then start chipping at the melody last. And I think that's helpful.
Yeah, that's great advice. I actually used that advice. I was working on Desverada. Is that? I can't. I'm probably saying it completely wrong. The Brazilian tune, but sure. I was having a hard time remembering the parts, and I was like, I need to go back and just learn the chords. And it's easier when like, oh, I'm playing that over a D minor. It's way easier to remember. Oh, these notes are.
Well, yeah, it takes the guesswork, and that's the thing, right? Like, I don't know a lot of scales, but I can tell you every note and every chord ever, right? That's kind of where I do succeed in that side of things. I know how to build chords and substitute chords and things like that. But yeah, I mean, if right, like if you're having a hard time finding a melody note and the key's D minor, don't go for C sharp first.
That's great advice.
Yeah.
When you go through and you did that tune, was it 100 fiddle tunes?
Yeah, it ended up being like 97. I cut a few, but yeah.
Yeah, so I'd love to talk about where you find some of these tunes, and like when you're learning one, do you listen to a bunch of different versions, or do you just find, where do you find all these tunes? Especially like, was it Old Piss?
Right. Old Piss I heard once in an old time jam or something a long time ago, but I never retained it or remembered it. And then I heard Mike Compton play it somewhere, and then I kind of like fused some of every version that I heard. I mean, my favorite way to learn tunes, well, like, man, I guess if you're learning common tunes, just learn them from recordings. But if you want rare tunes, you got to go hang out at festivals, and you got to go hang out in jams, and you got to hang with old dudes, and you got to you got to dig for them. It's not easy. Like, Victor and I and Carter just cut this tune on a record called Liquor Cellar that that I've never heard before, that was taught to Victor by Earl White. I don't know if you know Earl White. He's like the kind of legendary old time fiddler, and other than hearing Victor play it via Earl White, I never heard it in my life. And I tried to look it up, and the only thing I could find was James Bryan plays kind of a version of it, but it's not exactly the same. So there are these tunes that basically only exist. Like, I might be, Victor and I and Earl might be the only few people playing that publicly right now. Or, I don't know. Like, these tunes are rare, and it's cool. Like, I love Whiskey Before Breakfast and Soldier's Joy as much as the next guy, but it's so cool to hear a tune that's old and almost forgotten, and, and get a chance to bring it back into the sphere a little bit. It's really cool.
So how do you retain? That's another question that comes up a lot. I see on like the Mandolin Cafe is like retaining tunes, So there's 97 tunes you learned to record.
Right.
How do you work on song retention?
Well, I mean, it's funny. I trimmed down the list, right? I mean, that's like right. That's really kind of a small sampling, but like My thing is I remember a lot of melodies and I don't worry about retaining names at all. That helps me compartmentalize some of it, right? Like I'll be in a jam. This happens to me all the time. And someone says, hey, let's play, whatever. Let's play Whiskey Before Breakfast, which obviously I know that one. But if it's something that, I'll go, okay, cool. Which one is that, right?
Right, yeah,
Like,
yeah.
the names don't seem to stick around real well for me always. But, the melodies are all there. And I think the way I can keep them in there is like the tags usually aren't a huge part of the melody, right? So if that's not exact, that's cool. And then the contour, like I kind of know the opening phrase sounds kind of like this, and in the middle is a little higher maybe, and it's for some of the tunes it's kind of rough sketches, but once I hear them or once I get playing them, or I take 5 seconds before we kick the tune off and like just try to dig in there and remember some of it. It's I don't know. I mean, I don't think a lot about retaining tunes. I've been lucky that they kind of stick around for me pretty well. But gosh, I don't know. I guess I don't have a good answer. I just hope they stick around, really.
Right. I mean, I guess the first key is learning them, and it sounds like your process to learning them is pretty involved. Again, listen to it, be able to hum it, learn the chords, then work on the melody.
Everybody knows hundreds of songs. Like, if you go to if you put on your like little radio station that plays stuff from like when you were a kid, whatever. Like I don't know when you grew up. I'm assuming it's like 80s. 80s is like the music that you know. Like by hearing the first note of like 500 songs from the 80s, I'm guessing you would know them.
Absolutely.
And it's like that, but I didn't grow up with that stuff. I grew up with fiddle tunes. So it's been in my head for a long time.
That's so funny, man. It's that happens all the time with like tunes. Somebody will come up when I'm playing and will ask for like an old bluegrass tune that maybe I'm not familiar with. I'm like, I definitely know it, but it's going to take me a minute, or I'll need to pull up the words real quick to remember the words. But if somebody comes up and says like, hey, could you play this some weird 80s tune? I'll be like, yeah, I got it right here, like at the top, like the tip of my tongue. I might have never even played it before, but I can look at a chord chart and be like, yep, I can play that. It's so bizarre, but that's, like you said, that's what I grew up with. I didn't get into bluegrass until the early 2000s, and so I don't have that burned into my brain stuff.
Not in your right. You weren't raised up on it, so it's different. Whereas, like, yeah. Like, my dad probably knows more songs than anyone. But he's not a picker. It's like other stuff, right? It's like whatever. He's just like a music lover. But there's people like that, it's the same for if you're a picker or whatever. You retain the stuff that you grew up digging, and it doesn't seem like... It would be different now if I were to get into, like, if I started playing, rock music tomorrow. For me to retain 500 rock tunes would be very hard. Because would be a new thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But yeah, the fiddle tunes have always been around for me, so it hasn't been such a hurdle. But when you start something later in life, or it's a new hobby, like it is different to memorize 500 new tunes when you're 40. Well, like my wife. Take my wife for example. Like she plays guitar and sings some, and she's just not a bluegrass picker, but she's like had me teach her a couple fiddle tunes here and there. And, I'll hear her around the house whistling them, humming them, but she's like, I don't know what these are, and I can't remember the names and all that stuff. So, it's like if you're not grown up with it, it's definitely not the same.
When you get like a sideman gig, is it ever anything where it's something you're not really familiar with, where you have to do a little homework on?
I don't do the sideman gigs as much anymore because they're not that fun.
Yeah.
But yeah, sometimes, man. I mean, I love to help out when I can, and especially if it's artists that I like their music, it's easy. But if just to do the thing of like, hey, we're a band you never heard of, and we're playing at the Lucky Strike pool room for 4 hours on it. Like I'm not doing those deals like that anymore. So I don't know. Yeah, I mean, I've had to learn a bunch of tunes really quick and stuff, and that's cool. But I just, I had a student ask me about that the other day, and my advice to him was just, if you have to learn 20 tunes by tomorrow, learn 20 verses and 20 choruses, right? And then the arrangements, try to get those as you go along. Like, get those before, like worry about the arrangements last. Like at least kind of know the form and the verse and the chorus, and then work outward from that. But yeah, that's a different skill. I mean, I do a lot of that on sessions and stuff now, but to do those sideman gigs like that, where hey, here's 25 tunes, you got to learn them by tomorrow. I don't love doing those anymore. But yeah, I mean, I have done them a lot for sure.
Yeah, well, it just makes you a well-rounded player in the early days anyway. It's great that you don't have to rely on those gigs, you know?
Yeah, for sure. And that's like we talked about the bass player thing, right? That's the reality. The best bass player in the world still has to do that all the time. You know, that's just their scene. But yeah, you can to get away from that sometimes if you're a guitar player, or if you have enough demand in other areas, you know, which I've been lucky.
Yeah, the bass player's a tough one, man. There's a few really good ones here in town. And if I get like a last minute gig, like I got an offer last night, and I'm like, oh, nah, you know, bass player number 1, is he available? I don't know. He might be booked with, you know, some crazy gig because he's one of the best bass players in town. You know, unfortunately, there's a few to go on, but it's been a couple times where I've had to turn a gig down because I couldn't find a bass player.
Yeah, well, that's the thing. Like Carter can work any time he wants for as many days as he wants, and you know, it's like it's very different. Like he can. If he want, you know, if you're one of the good bass players around, yeah, I mean, people want you and will take you anytime you offer yourself up. So it's very different. And I hear him turn down gigs all the time. It's so funny. Like we'll be, you know, riding in a car somewhere. He'll be over here just hanging out, and he'll get a call and he'll go, "Hello, nope, sorry, I can't go to Canada tomorrow. Oh, yep, we'll try again." You know, and I'm just like, "What was that?" And he's like, "Oh, that was so and so. Seeing if I wanted to go to Canada for 3 weeks." I'm like, "Are you kidding me?" You know, like just off rip, like one day before. It's hilarious. And I mean, and you know, I have some of that too. But bass players live a different life.
Bass players, you got to know the tunes, man. Like bass player screws up, and there goes the song.
Yeah, the person who has it the easiest always makes me laugh sometimes, like a fiddle player. If they don't know tune, like, yeah, I can't tell you how many, like, quote unquote, tasteful fiddle players I've been on a gig with where they play about 2 notes a night.
No, man, now I really want to dig into a little bit about the right hand technique. I mean, man, you're in the top percentile easily. And one of the things that I really love about the fact that you play fast is you don't lose any clarity. Like you have some of the cleanest fast picking.
Oh man, thank you.
Yeah. And I would love to know how you work that up, because there's a lot of people out there who can play fast, or there's a lot of people out there who can play clean, but they can't do both.
Yeah, well, man, it's kind of a. Sorry, I'm getting in the car here. Just gotta run around. But I mean, for me, it's kind of a game of. You have to know, like, it's about sacrifices. So if I want to play, the way that I play something at 90 is not the same way I play it at 190. Like, the vocabulary shifts. Everything simplifies. Everything gets a little more linear. Yeah, but no, like, so when I play at those high tempos, like, all the extra bull crap kind of goes away. Like, I'm not doing all the fancy stuff. It's just like, let's tighten up, get to the melody, kind of let the playing be a little more linear, a little bit more straight. And go from there. Like, you know, if I played my 180, 190 BPM vocabulary at 100, it would sound so boring. It would put you to sleep. And that's the thing a lot of players don't realize. They think they're speeding up their 100 beats a minute playing to a higher tempo. But it's just a different vocabulary. It's a different approach. So yeah, like if I'm playing at 100, that stuff cannot be sped up or slowed down. That's the 100 BPM stuff, you know. And if I'm playing at 120, that's where that vocabulary lives, is in that tempo range. And I tend to think every 15, 20 clicks, you're going to have to dumb it down, maybe even less than that.
When you get to a breaking point, or, you know, like, for me, there's a weird thing of like, for whatever reason, 120 is like always a weird hurdle, but I can play at 130 the same thing. You know, it's like that weird, it's like singing where you have to find your falsetto and find where your voice breaks. You know, like I know I can sing this high, but when I do this here, I have to switch to a different voice. How do you combat that plateau, you know, for you, when you get to a spot where you're like, I know I can get this faster, but I got to get it here first before I ramp it up? How do you approach it?
Well, yeah, I mean, one of the things is like not every tempo is in the pocket for every song. Like maybe your red-haired boy just doesn't work at 110. Maybe you gotta play it at 115 or 105, right? There's things like that where, just groove issues where you're like, this doesn't sit quite right. Let me bump it 5 clicks, or let me pull it down 10 clicks, or whatever. And that's its own thing. But, to get, I don't know, to up the tempo, I always just, I don't know. I'm kind of lucky because when you learn when you're a kid or whatever, there's not all this pretense about like, oh, how do I play faster, or what should my technique be? You just play faster because that's what you're being asked to do. When I was young, I remember being like, oh, this song's fast, I'll play it fast. Right. And that's the only thought I ever had about it, because it doesn't, you don't have all this time to think about why or how, or if you can or can't or whatever. And, so I don't know. I guess I don't have a great answer. I don't know if that makes sense.
Oh, no. Yeah, no. I mean, it makes us, again, when you learn something as a kid, it's like so different because it's just like, it's ingrained in you. That's just how you do things. That's the beauty of being a kid is there's not a whole lot of thought. You know what I mean? You're like, hey, let's jump off this bridge. Not a whole lot of thought. You just jump off.
Right. 100%. Yeah. 100%.
As you get older, you're like, should I jump off this bridge?
Yeah, man, it's funny. It's like there's so many things like that. Like like when I was a kid, I used to skateboard a lot, and that's still something that I can do. Like I can get on a skateboard and ride away until the sunset. That's like easy for me. But learning to do that at my age now, I would probably die. It's like new things like that. I'm not gonna. It's just stuff like that. When you're a kid, you learn these things that are easy, and you can retain them into adulthood. But it's kind of like back to the learning tunes thing. When you're older, it's a different game. It's more heavy lifting involved when you're learning to flat pick when you're 40 or 50 or whatever. When you're a kid, it's like you soak everything up so fast, it's so easy.
When you get your students, are there a couple things that you notice right off the bat? I mean, you obviously taught lots of people. You do the home study thing, and are there some common mistakes that you see in a lot of players that maybe people listening today could pull a mirror out or a recorder out and be like, okay, I just run through Turkey in the Straw and listen for this or look at this?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that, especially that I can tell of students, like a main thing that bothers me is when they slur everything. When there's like too many hammer-ons, too many pull-offs, too much kind of that economy picking thing, whatever. Like, I like to see a student, can they articulate every single note of a melody in time, and then make a choice if they want to slur something. But, so many players rely on hammer-on, pull-off, this and that, and just slide through everything. And, so that's something I watch out for. Like a lot of, anybody can get the notes and rhythms of a tune right, but the articulation is like that's where the kind of the rubber meets the road for me. Within 1 second of hearing a student play, I can tell if they've transcribed fiddle players or transcribed whatever. It's all about as opposed to notes and rhythms, it's always about like the groove and the pocket of it and the energy and where the beat lies and all that stuff. So that's where I kind of, I spot that first, I think.
And then what about just building right hand technique? Again, this is like a lifelong sort of thing, but I don't know that I could ask many better people than you, kind of how you get, especially the volume that you still seem to maintain. I mean, I know you said you dumb it down a little bit, but as far as like grip and, and all that stuff, like how do you kind of approach it to maintain the speed that you do?
Well, yeah, my first thing is I try to minimize tension, right? So that's everything from posture to like not squeezing my pick too hard, not using too much wrist or arm, trying to keep everything kind of even and in line. And then, like a lot of the advice I give to students is the best thing I ever did for my technique was to forget about the sound at first and defer to the feeling of it and the physicality of it. So like, kind of striving for comfort first and then adjusting from there. If it feels good, many times it will sound good. And there, there's some tension that you can't avoid. Like there's always going to be something about playing hard, playing loud, playing fast, whatever. That, I mean, you can feel it's a physical thing, but it shouldn't feel painful. You know, it should feel good. It should feel just like maintainable, sustainable, whatever. You should be able to. It should feel like you could do it for a prolonged amount of time and not hurt yourself.
What about advice for mandolin players? I mean, obviously you play with a bunch of them when you do. What's some advice for to be a good mandolin player in a jam or even on a gig? What's some things that you think make a very good mandolin player in your mind?
If you want to play in my band, you have to listen to a whole lot of Bill Monroe. That's for starters. It's funny, like, I was in a band with this guy once. I used to bust his chops on this all the time. It kind of drove me crazy. He used to say that he thought Bill Monroe was unlistenable. And, I always wanted to say, like, man, we can tell. We can tell you think that, right? It's funny, but it's also kind of like, yeah. So for me, a great mandolin player has some reverence for Bill Monroe, obviously, and, like, so many mandolin players now sound like Yngwie Malmsteen or something. Like, why, it's become so slick and, like, linear and stuff, where the mandolin, to me, has its strength lies in kind of that fiddle thing, where the fiddle can be kind of rough and rowdy and it can really pour the gas on. And I think, like, when I think of great mandolin players that I like to listen to, give me, like, Mike Compton and Dave McLaughlin and like, Chris Henry and, whatever, guys like that are playing real, like, mandolin that sounds like mandolin. So that's important for me. And then also the chop. I mean, I, like, in the studio and, like, in a session or on a gig, in my wedge and my ears, whatever, the chop and the bass are on 100. And everything else is pretty much cut. That's the way I like to operate. So yeah, I mean, a lot of time, and I like the playing to sound like mandolin. I don't know if that makes sense.
Absolutely. I love when people are like, "Oh, Bill Monroe's sloppy," and I'm like, just transcribe, just learn any one Bill Monroe solo and play it exactly like he does, and then let's talk about it.
Well, it's like saying Van Gogh is sloppy. Right. Like, not everything has to be, like, photorealistic, right? Things can have some taste and some, like, mystery to it, and that's Monroe's playing. Yes, it doesn't sound like a metal guitar player playing legato. That's not the point. It's supposed to be. It's a mood. It's a whole color spectrum. It's a whole different thing than just some dumb licks that are really clean and really whatever. It's like it's so much more than that. It's like, it has so much feeling. Great Monroe style mandolin playing has so much balls. It has so much grit. It's awesome.
I did at IBMA 2 years ago. I watched Lauren Price and the Price Sisters play a couple times, and I kind of did a video lesson with her, because I'm like, can you break down some of that slippery, slidey stuff for me? Because she does it, and it's so hard to do well and make it sound good. And like her and Compton and Chris Henry have it down. But man, again, even with having a video lesson and a breakdown, it's a sound.
Man, they grew up really close to me, actually. The Price Sisters. Lauren is amazing. She's like, she's great. She's another one. Ronnie McCurry's another one. Man, I mean, there's so many, but that's the sound I like. It's a mood, and it's a whole thing.
Yeah, definitely. Well, dude, let's talk real quick. I know you also got a new axe. You got a new guitar just recently.
Boy, did I.
And by the way, I love the internet is so ridiculous, dude. Like, you did the video about it, and you're like, people ask me all these questions. How much should I pay for it? First off, it's nobody's business how much anybody pays for anything. They just need to stop asking that question. It's nobody's business.
It is nobody's business. I'll tell you what, we should actually put this on your podcast, because I think you have the right attitude about it. I'll tell you this. I paid less than half of what it's worth. So I did really good on it. I'll tell you that much. The guy was a fan of mine. It was crazy. Like, I was at this Bryan Sutton camp thing, and I was playing all these herringbones, and I played a bunch of them over the years, and I'm always like, oh, they're so great. But so I just asked, like, I asked some of the guys there. I won't name who that had them, but I mean, some of these guys. And I just said, hey, like, how do you guys get the money to buy these things? Like, it's a lot of cash. And some guys told me, some of the collectors there, some of the guys, the other teachers there, they're like, well, a lot of us kind of have relied on the generosity of people who want to sell their herringbone that are also a fan of ours. Like, right, that's the intersection you have to look for. Like, people who have an instrument they want to part with and they want to get it in the hands of a player. And then I remember during this conversation that at a festival once, there was a guy there who liked my playing and stuff, who showed me his herringbone. And he said to me, if you ever want to buy it, let me know. And I remembered that conversation. I was like, I'm going to call that guy. And so I kind of hatched this plan. I'm going to sell a couple guitars. I'm going to get a hold of this guy, see if he wants to make a deal. And he did. He said, people have been trying to buy this guitar for years. And I've said no. He's like, but I think you're the right guy for it. And I love your plan. And I got every dollar that I could possibly find and drove to Cleveland and bought it. And it was crazy. His kids were there and his wife was there. It was like an emotional thing. It was like, one of this guy's, kind of, to me, it seemed like one of his only things of like, real value that he had hung on to for a long time. Like it was, I think he bought it when he was kind of younger and like, it just, something he had for a long time and worked hard to get. And so it was kind of an emotional thing, it was really cool. And to like have him kind of bestow it on me for really pennies on the dollar is really incredible. And like, I don't know how I could have pulled it off otherwise. It was still so much money. Even you say a good price on a 43 herringbone, that's it's like saying oh, we got a good price on our house. Like, yes, but it's still a lot of friggin' money. So
you're talking to a guy who's the top instrument in my world is a lore. A good price on a lore is a lot of money. You know what I mean?
Right, and like the herringbones are kind of in that same range now. It's insane. It's completely insane.
Yeah, well, I can tell you, I've never asked one person what they paid for their lore. Again, it's a personal thing, man. Like you said, like you're going to this guy's house, his family's there, this bestowing this thing. Well, what a first thing. So, wow, what'd you pay for that? It doesn't matter. It's none of your business. It blows my mind, right, dude.
It's super weird. I mean, and I've heard like, I mean, a lot of those lures and stuff, and the herringbones are like in that, they hover in that 6-figure and up range. Especially if you're gonna like if you're gonna go buy one at Gruen or Carter Vintage or something, bring a pile of money.
Yeah, a bank loan officer.
It's crazy. Yeah, I mean, it was like even getting the money out to buy the herringbone was like hilarious because I had to I hit my withdrawal limit like days in a row, and I had to do the same to my wife's account. I was sending money to Carter. I sent money to my mom. I sent money to everybody. Like, hey, go to the bank and get this out for me. Like, I don't even know how to get this money. Yeah. It's crazy.
Oh man, it's so great. Well, congratulations.
Thanks, man.
I love when a good instrument gets in a good player's hands. It's so cool.
And that thing is amazing. And it I mean, I have had a lot of great old guitars before that, but this thing is a whole different, I mean, it's nuts. It's bonkers.
Is it like a mandolin? Did the guy play it a lot? Was it kind of sleepy when you got it, or was it pretty?
It was not sleepy when I mean, it was sleepy for like 5 minutes when I went to his house. He's like, just keep playing it, it'll open up. And man, it did. He, the story on it's kind of cool. I haven't told this anywhere, but he bought it in Michigan, like in the 80s or 90s, I think. And it was in someone's basement, and it was full of mold. He said it was green and hairy inside. It was like all, where it just hadn't been played. It's just been left sitting. And someone had dug out the sound hole to look like Tony Rice. It had the big sound hole, and it had a black plastic pickguard on it. So he took it to Dave Musselwhite, who was like the head of Martin Repair or whatever back in the days, like a legendary Martin Repair luthier. And Musselwhite says, oh, no big deal. I have a 43 herringbone I'm using for parts. And he routed out the rosette, and he took off the pickguard from another guitar and put it in my guitar. So there's like a little strip of that rosette where it used to be dug out to look like Tony Rice has been glued back in from another herringbone of the same year.
Oh, no kidding.
And you can never tell. And like when I talked to Musselwhite about it, he's like, he said, basically that guy could have never even mentioned that. Like, there's no way you'd ever even know. But it was, so it's had, like, that's basically all the work it had done to it. So it, had that little thing of the rosette glued in and the pickguard replaced, and, the rest is pretty much straight. It's really, really killer. It's pretty clean and great. Sounds great.
Well, I got 2 more questions for you. I know you're getting ready to go on a well-deserved vacation here, so...
yeah, allegedly.
The first question is, So what is something, if you only had 10 minutes to recommend to somebody to work on something, what would you recommend them working on?
Oh man, yeah, like just learn a tune or learn a section of a tune. Like use your if you learn one measure of a tune only in 10 minutes, then do it 32 days in a row and learn a tune. Like that's the thing. Learn the tunes and and the other thing, if you only have 10 minutes, learn if you're not going to learn a tune, like learn some chords to a tune, or learn a tag, or practice a tune you already know with the metronome, or stuff like that. So some maintenance, but mostly new stuff. Yeah.
And do you have a favorite beer?
Oh boy, so there's this place in Athens, Ohio, not too far from us, called Jackie O's. This is where I went to college. They have this beer there called the Raz Wheat that I'm a forever fan of. That's probably got to be my favorite.
Well, Jake, man, I know you're super busy, and I really appreciate you taking the time to do this podcast. And I love your playing, dude. And you're just and I can say this because I've met you, you're just a super nice guy, man. You and your brother both are just super cool people, as well as talented, and that's great.
Well, man, thanks so much. Yeah, it's great to talk with you, and hopefully we'll get to hang again soon.
So what's the best place for people to find you, Jake?
Just go to my Instagram. It's the Jake Eddy.
Awesome.
It's got all the good stuff on there.
Yeah, but good stuff. That's putting it mildly, but I would venture to say some great stuff on there.
Oh man, thank you. Yeah, appreciate you.
All right, thanks again for tuning in. What a great talk with Jake. Just inspiring, great attitude. Welcome to Stringjoy. Thank you so much for joining up. Go to their website right now and buy some of those brand new mandolin strings and get 10% off. Mandolin beer, all one word, at checkout. Speaking of checkout, let's check out a little bit of Jake Eddy playing some jazz stuff with his brother Carter on bass. Cheers, everybody.